Oh, residential parking permits could be coming to a neighborhood near you.
That's right. Several New York City council members have proposed a new law, and it's now up to Albany to approve it. So Councilmember Carmen De La Rosa, who represents Washington Heights, Inwood, and Marble Hill, joining us this morning to explain how these permits will actually work. It's a big talker, especially for the folks who live in those communities and for the folks who go there to park now, right? So let's talk more about the area, because it is difficult to park there. This is not a new issue, but now you have congestion pricing, people trying to avoid the congestion zones, they park there. So how much would the permit cost?
So that is left open in the law. What we're asking is the Albany to give us permission so that we can do a pilot program through the Department of Transportation here in the city. So every community theoretically would have the opportunity to chime in. We know that the fee has to be accessible for working class New Yorkers. Obviously, we want them to access the fee, but also we know that it has to create revenue enough to make sure that we can fund infrastructure projects.
Describe how this would be enforced, and how do you figure out like what street is included in which permit, right? Because if you're using it as a park and ride, there's so many different neighborhoods.
Absolutely. So right now, at least 8 different council members have put in pilot programs for their own communities. So the voices of the communities are going to be reflected based on what their council member brings to the table. For my community, what we're looking at is obviously leaving commercial strips alone, because we need our commercial businesses to be able to have access to parking for different visitors. And then looking at streets that are solely residential, right? So there's streets that are off and creating a zone in those residential streets in order to make sure that we have spaces. Obviously, there's more need than parking spaces in New York City. So there's logistical issues there that we need to work through this bill. But one of the things that we're looking at is working with folks like our local community boards, having these conversations, having DOT come into communities and helping us to build these pilots out.
Why leave the cost up to whoever?
Because right now, what we want to make sure is that it is accessible to New Yorkers. My community is a working class community. It makes no sense for me to put forward a permit that they cannot afford to pay. And so I think it is a very intimate conversation with communities in terms of determining what that permit amount will be. Eventually, it will be in the statute of the law.
Okay.
So there will be a set permit.
Did this come to be because of congestion pricing?
No, this is a generational issue of parking. I mean, I've lived in Upper Manhattan my entire life. There's never been parking, but congestion pricing has definitely exacerbated the conditions in our communities. I have the A train and the 1 train, but we're at the end of the train lines. So what's happening is that our friends and neighbors from Yonkers, New Jersey, Westchester are driving into our communities, parking, and then taking the A train, taking the 1 train down into the congestion zone.
Why would they do that prior to congestion pricing?
Well, they were doing that prior to congestion pricing because it's easier sometimes to find parking in communities like mine than having to come in and pay meters that are much higher in Lower Manhattan. But with congestion pricing, now there's an added bonus.
And also, you probably avoid a little bit of traffic trying to get out of the city. So you jump on a train, get your car up there, and it's an easier ride back to Westchester,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
But can we talk about enforcement one more time? Because how do we really enforce, you know, who gets this permit, and then what happens to the people that don't have the permit? And then, of course, you have all the delivery trucks.
Yeah, absolutely. So the delivery trucks have loading zones, and so they'll be taken care of.
But they rarely park in the loading zone.
Enforcement is key here. And what we're seeing in terms of enforcement is that the Department of Transportation will have the enforcement arm, but they have to work hand in hand with the NYPD. You know, what we've seen, even with speed cameras, even with red light cameras, is that when people are ticketed, they change behavior. And so we're not trying to catch anyone, but we are trying to change behavior and make sure that people understand that these are residential communities where people live, where people work, and we have to respect and share our streets.
So what are the next steps, right? Because it's an Albany decision, really, right? So do you have Albany sponsors who are on board with this, and you know, just the behind-the-scenes conversations of how it's looking?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, about 6 council members have put in pilot projects in the city council, and now we need Albany to give us permission. Recently, we have Assemblymember Micah Lasher, who is now leading the bill along with Assemblymember Alex Boris. So we're moving on the Assembly side, and in the Senate, we have Senator Robert Jackson, who's carrying the bill. So now we need the governor to start paying attention to this conversation, and hopefully, as the legislative session moves before June, we'll get the permission and the home rule from Albany to do so.
What kind of pushback have you heard to a permit program?
Well, people are concerned, rightfully so, about affordability. That is the main concern. You know, people feel like they're being taxed already. And so that is why that conversation on the price is so important.
Yeah. Have you talked to the mayor about it?
Not yet, but we do have the support of Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine. We're working through our colleagues in the city government. Obviously, the mayor's been a little busy, so we are going to have those conversations with the city as well.
I mean, this is a naive question, I guess, but why does it cost anything? Can't you just prove that your address is in this area and you just get the permit?
That could be theoretically, right? In the bill, it doesn't assign a fee. But the reason why we think a fee is important is because there are local projects that need help. For example, in my community, our parks, parks have less than 1% of the city budget. And so if revenue is going to come into the city, we should be able to say, hey, a local park in my community needs the help. And so by generating these funds and earmarking them towards infrastructure projects, we're then shoring up some of the issues we've had historically.
Last question here. If congestion pricing goes away, because that is a real conversation that's happening, right? There's this whole idea that President Trump could pull it. This is still moving forward in the same way, same format, same everything, with or without congestion pricing.
Absolutely. It's still moving forward. I think it's still a conversation that our communities are excited about, and we owe it to our constituents to look for solutions to some of their everyday issues.
All right, Council Member Carmen De La Rosa, I appreciate you being here this morning. Keep
pleasure.
us posted on how it goes. When's the vote?
Not yet. We haven't scheduled it
Okay,
yet.
gotcha. Keep us posted, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.